So, good evening. I'm calling to order the Affordable Housing Trust Committee. It is 7:04 on Thursday, July 10th. I am Martha Gannon, Vice Chair of the Trust. Our first order of business is the reorganization of the board.
So the Hector, our chair, is no longer be able to serve on the board, and so we'll have to reorganize the board, and we will have the vice chair, Martha Gannon, acting as the acting chair. And so we'll need the members of the trust to vote to nominate Ms. Gannon.
I nominate Martha Gannon as chair.
Second.
Oh, I guess all in favor then?
Okay, then we should nominate Beth Shea Bryant as Vice Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust Committee.
I make that motion. So I think
Okay.
it's a second.
So I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we would like to nominate Mr. Carlos Garcia as the clerk.
Yes.
So I move to nominate Carlos Garcia as clerk of the trust.
And I second that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Congratulations. Okay, and then we have our next agenda item is to review and approve the minutes. Has everybody read the minutes from April and May?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah, great.
okay. Do we- Okay, motion.
I'll move. Okay. I move to approve the minutes of the Affordable Housing Trust from April and May.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next, to review and sign any bills.
We have no bills this evening.
Okay. Next, board member comments.
Trust members, I do have one. Just wanted to share with you all that the select board at its meeting on Tuesday, July 8th, talked a lot about housing and 40B. And think it's definitely a worthwhile meeting to watch. We talked a lot about our, I think, ability to actually reach the 10% 40B goal and attain safe harbor, which is in alignment with our trust's goals. And I think that that's really important that the community and that we as a trust attain that and maintain that once we have it, because I know, and we all know that whenever there's development in the community, there's a lot of discussion and concerns, and so with Safe Harbor, we'll be able to have a little bit more. We'll have more local control, which I think many in the community will appreciate. So certainly, that's all I have, but just encourage members to watch it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Just want to make a comment because I think it's just by surprise Hector was leaving at our last meeting, and just want to put on the record to thank him publicly for
Yes.
all the dedication he gave to this board since we formed. I believe it was 2021. So I just want to send out a huge thank you to him and let the town know that we really appreciated all the work he did, and words cannot even express the knowledge that he brought to this board, and that was even more thankful for that, and we wish him well.
Those were my sentiments exactly. I was going to do the same.
Great
He was
alike.
invaluable to this board, getting it up and running. And even though I joined a year or two into it, he helped me along tremendously. And just having that knowledge when we were kind of thinking, what are we doing? He's like, just keep going. We're getting there. We're getting there. And he said he's launched us so we can continue the work. So I would
Yes.
also. He will
Would be
definitely be
missed.
missed.
Wonderful man, and
Yes.
so knowledgeable, and
I wish him well. Yes, thank you. Okay, any more comments? Okay, then, new business. First is the draft build out the analysis of phase one, a brief overview from CMRPC staff.
Yeah, so the planning department early last year applied for DLT funding. That's district local technical assistance funding through CMRPC to help develop a build-out analysis for Shrewsbury. The objective of the analysis was to assess the potential future development based on current zoning regulations, land use policies, infrastructure, and environmental constraints. And I think the reason why we brought this up at the Trust was the build-out analysis uses similar criteria that the planning department developed to identify town and parcels that would be the most suitable for developing affordable housing. And as you can see on the screen, we have some members from CMRPC, which is a regional planning agency that provides assistance to towns with planning related matters, especially any projects on a large scope. And so from here we have Matt Franz from CMRPC and Jordan Hollinger, who worked on the build-out analysis, as well as Emily Globitz, who will be working with us on several projects. And I think kind of the reason, why we asked them here was, at the last meeting, I added the materials, the build-out analysis for you to review, and I think there was a lot to unpack. And I think just having a brief overview from CMRPC would kind of be helpful. So I don't know, Matt or Jordan, if you can hear, and you are, why don't you take it away?
Right, just had to get my thought I was hitting the right button for unmute and then a different button.
Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is, first of all said, my name is Matt Franz. I'm the GIS director here at CMRPC. And I'm just going to go over a very brief discussion of how the build out kind of moves along, what we do. I'm going to be tackling the GIS side of things, and then I'm going to pass on to Jordan, who handles the sort of Excel side of build out analysis. And if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time or whatever. I'm happy to answer. And we can also answer any follow-up questions after. So basically, as Commissioner mentioned, the build out analysis basically takes a look and see what is the potential development in the town, looking at the zoning and the constraints and all that. So on the GIS side, that's the first component of the build out analysis. Basically, what we do is we start off with the town zoning data. We meet with the town to figure out, okay, what are going to be absolute constraints, which prohibit development, and what are going to be partial constraints, which allow development but have some restrictions to them. We determine what's going to be used for those two categories, go about, get the GIS data for them, and then basically bring that into the GIS model. And that we run the model, what happens is basically the absolute constraints get taken out of the zoning data, and then the partial constraints basically are merged in with the zoning data. So where they overlap, they become their own little polygons. From that data, we then go about and update the the GIS acreage, and then that is the sort of end component on the GIS side of things. That data is then given to planners in our office who then use those GIS numbers, which are broken out by zoning districts and individual polygons, to then come up with a number of different data points, which I will let Jordan elaborate more on.
Yes. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so as Matt said, so out of kind of his GIS workflow, what we end up with is kind of this aggregation of land area. So if you imagine kind of a table where you have all of your zoning in one row, and then you have total acreage in, all of the zones in one column, and then total acreage in another. And so that's kind of what the output looks like. So it's not kind of in a small area by small area. This is kind of what we refer to as like an aggregate model. So like all of that land area is getting aggregated together. So for a single zone, you would have land area then further broken down by partial constraint. So just to give an example of some things that we usually use as partial constraints, like we break land out into like different slope categories. So you might have, I think in your case, we used 8 to 15% slope, 15 to 25% slope, and then 25+% slope. And so the idea there is that each one of those land areas would receive a different constraining factor that I'll talk a little bit more about. So we apply these, we call them build factors, what do we call them? Partial constraint factor. There's a lot of jargon here, but essentially it's a percent or a decimal that we apply to all of those land areas that's supposed to simulate the limiting effect of that partial constraint. So you can imagine an area with a 25% slope gets a smaller number than an area with a less steep slope. So I think in your case, for like a 25% slope, we used 0.25. So basically we're saying like 75% of that land area is being taken away from development, or we think that's the limiting effect. And so this is like a really subjective thing. It's kind of based on like town experience, and that's why we kind of talk with the town planners just to sort of discuss like when you've seen development in these types of areas, like how intense is it, how close does it get to kind of, fully building out, and that sort of thing. And so we kind of go down this long list of partial constraints and develop these build factors, apply it to all the land area that's coming out of Matt's GIS model, and then we go into the process of actually trying to calculate how many housing units and that sort of thing will come out of that land area. So the first step in that process is applying yet another build factor that we call the zoning build factor. And so this gets a little bit dense here, but essentially what we're trying to do is account for the type, the land area that would be used for things like roadways. And so you can kind of imagine from that initial acreage that we get from the GIS, we first constrain it based on those partial constraints, then we apply the subsequent factor that further reduces it to account for things like roadways and what we call odd lots, which is just it's just trying to kind of reduce that further to account for kind of oddly shaped areas. And so from that point, then we start calculating the actual buildable lots and the housing units that would result from all of that area. And so for areas that are zoned for primarily single family development, that's relatively straightforward. We just take the total land area, we divide it by the minimum lot size, and that gets us to our total housing units. For multifamily area, it's a little bit different because I think, if I remember correctly, in Shrewsbury, there's a little bit, there are a couple additional steps, like you have a minimum lot size for multifamily development, and then each additional unit requires like an additional square footage. So we do some additional math there just to arrive at kind of a total number of housing units. And so once we have those, the total housing units both broken down into single family and multifamily, then we apply multipliers to look at the impact of those housing units. And so these are things like per person or per housing unit multiplier. So one of the ways that we estimate the population that would be associated with all of those new housing units is through a population per housing unit multiplier. And so that we just calculate using census data, where we look at the number of the population in the town that is housed in single family homes versus multifamily homes. And so we can arrive at those numbers. So for example, in Shrewsbury, the multiplier for single family homes is 2.7, and for multifamily it's 1.9. And then we calculate similar, what we call student generation rates for single family and multifamily. So for single family homes, that's 0.52. So the idea is like each new housing unit, you get about a half a student, versus each new unit of multifamily housing, you get about 0.3 of a student. And so that is kind of how we arrive at new student numbers. And then we have all these other multipliers as well for things like water consumption, solid waste, electricity consumption. And those, if we can find that data like through the town, like if your water department, I think in your case, produces like a per person water consumption rate, so we can just use that to go along with our data. In some cases, we have to pull that from like the US EPA and other kind of national organizations that produce some of these metrics. So we use all of those multipliers as essentially multiplying either by the number of people that we're calculating or the number of new households that we're calculating, and arriving at some total figures for, again, things like water use, solid waste, electricity, total number of, or miles of new roads, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what it looks like. Not sure if that totally made sense. It's kind of a, you're layering on these build factors and then trying to calculate the number of housing units. But happy to answer questions about that if you have any, or maybe I've just confused you.
It sounded really good, so.
It's definitely very comprehensive, so really appreciate it. I think definitely a lot to absorb. You did give us a lot of information, so I don't know if I have a question immediately, but I just want to thank you all for your help and your work, and look forward to continuing to learn more. Really. So.
Yeah, I think kind of how this aligns with what our office and the Affordable Housing Trust are doing is, we have a lot of development that's happening in town, and we also want to be mindful of open space and conservation land that is a lot of unprotected areas that we could either acquire for the purpose of protecting open space and protecting conservation land. So I think trying to balance these two and, moving forward, sustainable development, I think should be a goal of ours. And I think this build out analysis can kind of be a step towards how, if we want to, how we can kind of go about development in the future. So I think that's a good step in that direction. Yes.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention, like, when you talk about open space and everything, the open space priority project that we're doing right now will be a useful tool as well in terms of like looking at that information, like what to protect and everything.
Right.
So once that, Grafton has been using theirs to kind of look at some of their information, but that'd be another tool once we finish that up, which will be sometime this year, before the end of December.
If I can just add on to, I think one of the interesting things that you can do with something like a build out, and Matt and I did a similar project with 3 other towns where we actually ran some scenarios with the build out analysis. So what you can essentially do is, say you're looking at doing something like open space residential development, or like changing your zoning in some way to kind of densify in one area and preserve open space in another area. You can bring that into the model, and you can look at like, oh, if we do this tweak to our zoning, what does that look like in terms of total housing units? Like, are we actually losing any housing units by building up in one place and kind of not allowing development in kind of untouched areas? And so you can do a little bit of that with the build out analysis, and just look at overall impacts to total number of housing units and the other kind of metrics that we look at.
All right.
It was, very comprehensive. It's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we, from here, we'll continue working with the plan department, but I think this is something we can incorporate in Affordable Housing Trust policy. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy to do it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next order of business is to review vacant town-owned parcels inventory update.
Yes, we have a quick update. So actually, I met with Emily, I think last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? At this point, I think it was before the 4th. We worked on, so I think from our June meeting, I informed Emily that we chose a few parcels from our vacant inventory, the 3 largest ones.
Yes.
And so I kind of met with her, we talked about that, and so I think we're going to work on the deeper analysis together. I already have some notes from that, so I'm going to share with that, and I think we're going to meet next week to start working on that.
Excellent.
So it's great moving forward. I think that was just a major update. But also along with that, Emily's going to be working where, we talked about rental assistance.
Yes.
So I think in that similar kind of how we're working with CMRPC for that, as well as other projects that, we have down the line. I think it'll be good to have that expertise.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, next item is the MHP Housing Institute review and discuss.
Yes. So I attended the MHP Housing Institute in Worcester on June 4th and June 5th. And the 2-day training engaged participants in discussion and problem-solving activities related to the development of affordable housing across Massachusetts. And on July 2nd, I sent a memo to the trust, which was a more comprehensive summary of the sessions that I attended and some of the key takeaways. I shared this with you probably a few weeks ago, around June, at the end of June. And then also recently I sent the presentation. So that should be with you. I don't know if I added it to the drive, but I sent you as an email. So you can review those slides. But, I think some of the key takeaways, so the day 1 was kind of the affordable housing development of kind of what we want to do with our vacant parcels, kind of talked about in Gloucester. I looked at the example of how a town goes through the process of exhaustively looking at a site. One takeaway was that the trust, when they choose a site, needs to exhaustively review the developability of a site before it chooses to start to send out an RFP for the parcel. And again, the trust should make sure that a site does not present significant challenges, and it needs to be physically, politically, and financially feasible. So by these, what I mean by these is physically, there shouldn't be any major topography issues, or it shouldn't be near a wetland area or something that would physically prevent or physically make it difficult for any construction. Financially, we should have, there should be, funding in place. If it's a small project, we can use, CPC funds or Affordable Housing Trust funds, but at a larger, if we're doing, multifamily housing, we'll probably have to use low-income tax credits for that. So that was the third session at the end of the RFP sessions, was looking at how affordable housing projects are funded. So kind of learned a lot of that. Very useful. And also once there was also a developer who talked about what they look for in an RFP that attracts them when a town sends an RFP. So we went through a whole, there was actually a session, the second session on the first day. Attendees were tasked with evaluating an RFP and identifying language and requirements that are unreasonable, such as excessive financial requirements like a high developer fee, requiring multiple architectural designs and site plans, an unrealistic timeline, lack of flexibility, and unclear evaluation criteria. So basically when we send out an RFP and we receive replies or we have different proposals from different developers, we have a scoring criteria, and we score them based on what we are looking for when we develop a scoring criteria. So that criteria in our RFP should be very clearly stated. So we kind of went through what is a bad RFP, and we kind of, all of us looked through, okay, these are some things that we identified would not be in an RFP. So I think that was a really good exercise. And we also visited, at the end of the first day, we visited two site visits at 2 projects in Worcester. The first one was the Grand Street Commons, a 48 unit housing project. Of the 46 units are affordable to households earning at or below 60% of area median income, and 10 of those units are designated for families earning at or below 30% area median income. So a truly affordable project. And you know, we talked to the developers, the Main South Street Community Development Corporation, and you know, some of their challenges with a site that was in an industrial part of Worcester, which had a lot of arsenic in the ground. So they had to get a lot of different funding and, you know, brownfield and to try and clean up the site. So that was kind of one takeaway. If we do develop in a former industrial or not a vacant parcel, that would be something that we would need to be mindful of. And then the second one was we looked at the former Worcester County Courthouse, which was Trinity Financial Apartments, 117 unit mixed income rental community in Lincoln Square. And I think what I really noted was the developer explained their use of their adaptive reuse strategies to retain the building's historic facade and architectural features while also constructing modern residential spaces. So I think adaptive reuse, especially for historical buildings, you know, and that we might have in Shrewsbury that we want to kind of redevelop, we can also still incorporate some sort of preserve some aspect of that was deemed historical. As well as looking at, and some of the key takeaways that we saw was that I took from was a mixed income community. I don't know if there are in Shrewsbury, or like mixed income, at least the type of where we have apartment projects, because a lot of them are, you know, 80% area median income, and certain, you know, if we break it down by certain 80%, some 60%, 30%, you know, there have been studies that show that mixed income projects are linked to higher property values and higher socioeconomic outcomes. So that was, you know, something that we could explore as well. And then day 2, this was, I think, that was a very interesting thing for any project that we have. Public engagement is very important, and very early on in the process, we need to start. And kind of, it noted that, you know, traditional public meetings can sometimes follow rigid formats and can limit productivity, and also, or limit productive conversations, and, you know, kind of act as a barrier for people. So, and then to improve engagement for projects, towns can organize interactive model building workshops using materials like Legos, bottle caps, buttons, and pipe cleaners. And so these hands-on sessions help residents better understand multifamily housing concepts and demonstrate how increasing housing density can help preserve open space. So kind of, we can use these creative ways to explain some concepts of what we have. I think that was something that I really enjoyed. There was also a session at the end of the day which focused on an online parcel database developed by MHP in collaboration with Wayfinders, as well as regional planning agencies in Western Massachusetts. And the database centralizes information from a wide range of sources and serves as a tool for exploring developable parcels in cities through Western Mass. So kind of what we're doing on a town scale, they're doing on like a regional scale, and using similar, similar factors as well as criteria. They identified qualities that make a site attractive, and speculative factors like old businesses or institutions that could close, that could be used for housing, as well as qualities that limit development, or factors that limit development. And kind of this database now encompasses over 325,000 parcels across across Western Massachusetts. And they are now working to improve the database to include parcels where ADUs could potentially be developed. So I think one thing that is really useful is it looks on a regional scale, and maybe we could, some lessons that what I saw is if other communities are engaged, we could work with CMRPC and other people to kind of, and other towns to kind of create a housing database for this. So I think that was something that I really enjoyed, that takeaway. But kind of this was another brief couple things, or some brief points that I took from the memo. But if you have any questions, happy to discuss that. Yes.
So with the MBTA zoning, Chris had done a presentation and there were Legos
Yeah.
and had maps up to look
Yeah.
at different areas of town
Right.
that could possibly fall into MBTA zoning, but I found the hands-on extremely helpful.
Right.
Because we would get these apartment buildings all built and then it'd be like, oh, where are you gonna put your dumpsters? Where are the fire trucks gonna
Yeah.
get in? So
Yeah.
I highly recommend, like, when we get to public engagement, that is part of it.
Right. There was an activity. There can be activities aimed at children. Can also foster productive engagements. There's a game called the Game of Zones, which challenges participants to build a maximum number of homes within certain zoning constraints. And this activity, the game, illustrates the limitations developers facing when accounting for existing conditions of zoning, wetlands, open space, and current existing structures. So kind of using fun ways to kind of educate and also talk about what are some of the constraints that we have and how we are. So I'm kind of imagining this, for 11 Elizabeth Street, once they start their community engagement, if we can kind of help them, or if they would like to we can, or when we have our own project, that would be something that we can start on early, starting public engagement early, as well as using these creative ways to kind of cultivate a sense, a support for housing in Shrewsbury, and also using it as framing it in a way where it's, our homes as opposed to something, abstract, like an affordability crisis, where it's like, oh, these are homes for people who would live here. So kind of trying to frame it in a way where we're more inclusive rather than kind of throwing abstract concepts at people. Residents, I think, was really good.
Right, make it a positive, community-based, people getting engaged.
Right.
Turning out to help other people in the community.
Right.
So, it's great, thank you.
I appreciate you
Yeah.
putting this together, attending, first of all.
Yeah.
And
Right.
attending and sharing your takeaways. Because I think that there's a lot of tools and resources and things that we can learn from other communities and agencies in terms of how we can better engage with the public about our housing challenges, and certainly would certainly would look to partner with other municipalities to create that database to talk about our housing challenges, because I feel like one of the things that I see a lot is we're a little bit more, I feel like when we talk about housing, we almost like isolate ourselves and think of ourselves as just like an island floating out
Right.
in the middle of nowhere, but really, we're all part of the Commonwealth, and
Right.
it's, all these challenges are beyond, just the borders of the town.
Right.
Really.
I mean,
Wow.
at the same time, we have a lot of people who come to Shrewsbury to do their shopping, and then we have a lot of Shrewsbury residents who visit Northborough Crossing, and
Right.
those towns are also being impacted by new housing developments.
Exactly.
So I think as a whole, this region is really changing, and how do we kind of go forward where we want to preserve our character, but we also want to preserve open space, and there are a lot of things that we want to do to continue to grow, but also preserve a lot of things. So
Right.
I think if we're interested, we can explore that further as we go. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be a great idea, because it's, right, our local area, our town, our local, and our state, it's the
Yeah.
country, everybody. Because
Right.
affordable housing is an issue for everybody. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a lot of great information to help us move forward.
Right.
Okay. Next we have the Affordable Housing Trust and CPC funding agreement update.
Yes, so at our June 12th meeting, the planning department, we shared a draft Affordable Housing Trust and CPC funding agreement. And this agreement would detail how much money we receive from the trust when we do request money, and also has certain conditions that we need to satisfy to receive the money. And the idea is that we apply for funding every year, and we ask for an amount based on how many projects we have in the pipeline for that year. So it would change based on if we have a lot of projects going that year, it'll be a larger number, and then a smaller number based on if we have already existing funds that we have. And also an important point to note that we will provide an annual report to the CPC, which details all the activity that we have done and what we will plan to do. This will be around January, so it'll be all the activity done prior, as well as what we plan to do for the next year, because January is typically the time when the CPC starts to receive projects of eligibility. So we will be aligned. We'll be aligned with their review, and then for town meeting, they will move to
Vote on it.
move it to town meeting. I think that
For
was
town meeting.
yes, to
Okay.
vote.
To vote.
And I think so. At their meeting on Monday, July 10th, July 7th, I believe, the CPC, they kind of had some comments. They looked at the draft funding agreement and kind of had some comments, and we're going to kind of incorporate some of that. But I just wanted, before I talk about their comments, I wanted to see if the trust members had any comments from the draft funding agreement. I know Martha really exhaustively worked with us for a year, so thank you so much for all your hard work.
Through it, and we got it pretty at the point where we thought this would meet both CPC and Affordable Housing Trust, and a good compromise to work together and build that relationship and hopefully fund these projects that we both want to get done.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm just appreciate the work of you and Hector and the CPC members who worked on this, because I think that I know we talk about this all the time, but we have shared goals, and I think that the CPC and the community have been eager to see CPC use some dollars towards housing projects, and I think that that's something that we're also very eager to do, so that we can make progress in creating and preserving affordable housing in the community. So I think that this is just overall a great step in fostering and strengthening that relationship that we have with them, and I look forward to executing and working on that with them.
Right.
In reviewing meetings to type up the minutes, I believe when Kathy was here, she said that housing is the only thing CPC has not given any funding out for. So,
Right.
we're a little overdue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, and so at the CPC's meeting on Monday, July 7th, Kathy expressed that she was comfortable with this, and also answered a lot of questions that the members had. I kind of reviewed that. Some of the members expressed, how will we be able to track some of their spending, and so we will submit our annual reports. We will be able to kind of report to them how we spent that money, as well as in the separate fund that'll be accessible to CPC and the trust. So they'll be able to monitor all our spending, and also any CPC funds that we use for housing can only be spent in ways according to the CPA statute. So CPC funds cannot be spent on maintenance or rehabilitation of existing housing. And so, but rental assistance is one thing where it is allowed. So I think that is something that we can, combine. I think my idea was to kind of combine a little bit of CPC and our trust money to at least have a little bit enough money in the trust fund where we could act quickly if we see a parcel for acquisition for affordable housing. I think that was, Kathy also explained that why we have, that reserve fund, which is larger. So I think, they had some questions and comments, so we're going to incorporate and workshop with the CPC, and also the planning department will incorporate that. If you have any comments, you can email me, and then hopefully at the August meeting we have something ready for the trust to vote on.
Yeah, I think this is great. And one thing that I appreciate, and I think the community will appreciate too, is that, we have that check and balance. It built into this. So,
Right.
If we spend over a certain amount, CPC and the select board will have to vote to authorize that expenditure, that transaction. So, that makes sure that, certainly we may have ideas on how we think our dollars should be spent. Of course, others will have their thoughts and will want to weigh in. And I think that just, if and when we execute and find projects to fund where all three of our boards and committees are in full agreement, or most, majority agreement, I think that that's just great and just shows the amount of support that all of our different entities have in creating affordable housing in the community. So. Right.
And I think, I think also one thing that we want to note to, we have that, with CPC, some of the CPC members did, they were initially a little bit uncomfortable with how before, agreement. I think a lot of them are very happy that we have an agreement so that they're able to track the spending. I think they were not sure of miscellaneous spending. I think that was what they were worried about, as well as, is it every year a fixed dollar amount and it can change? So I think this is a yearly thing, it's not one time they approve and then every year, it's going to be the same. So I think there are these checks and balances in place, and it's to cooperate and work together to build affordable housing.
Yeah, and I think it's just also just important to emphasize that we as a trust don't have a reliable income stream, whereas CPC does. So, being able to tap into that and support each other in that is huge.
Right.
So,
And I think we have to work with them to present the project that we want.
Exactly.
And they have to approve it. So
Right.
we're not going
Right.
to just take their money
Exactly.
and do what we feel best. It's going to be a truly joint effort
Right.
Yeah.
And
for both.
along with our report, I think we will be also submitting in that time a project eligibility. So kind of we'll list the number of projects that we're doing again, and then what we have in the pipeline, and then how we, estimate of how we're going to spend that. So at least it'll give them an idea of what we do. And then also in our report, we're going to say, yes, this is what we spent, this, and this. So I think that would also reassure the CPC members.
Excellent. Very positive.
But yes, if you have any comments, we have another month for any comments to be incorporated, so you can take your time to review and send me anything. Again,
Thank you. Okay, next we have any correspondence?
no correspondence this evening.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Next meeting.
Oh, yes.
The next meeting.
So our next meeting is scheduled for August 14th, I believe. Yes.
I'll be ready.
Yeah, okay. So do you know what dates you're away from?
On the 8th, and coming back. The 8th, I'll be back on the 15th.
Okay. All right, so I can talk with Chris and see what to do from there.
Could join remotely if need be,
Okay,
if there's no other dates.
okay. I can look into the third week of August, but I will let Chris know. All right?
Okay.
All
I'll
right.
be away the 21st.
Oh, you'll be the 21st?
Letting you know.
Okay.
I also can join remote.
Okay, just let me know. Well, Emily, thank you so much for attending. And then I'll kind of work with CMRPC for that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
It was nice to meet you all. Yeah, again, I'm really happy to be working on any kind of regional housing services for the town of Shrewsbury. So I'm here as a resource. Just wanted to introduce myself and a lot of really exciting things going on in the town. You guys have a lot of momentum. Yeah, I work with a lot of smaller towns that aren't even close.
Feels good.
The exciting projects that you're working on. So congrats on that. And, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Bye. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.